Joining us now is Marissa Smith, who is the Senior Regulatory Toxicologist at Washington State Department of Ecology. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
This is an interesting topic. You study hazardous chemicals in consumer goods. Now, when you think about exposure to hazardous chemicals, that's maybe not the first thing you think of. Is it more common than you think, than people think?
That's such a great point. And I think that what we often don't realize about consumer products is that it's a lot of small exposures. But the small exposures add up over time. And we interact with so many consumer products every day. If you just look around at the clothes you're wearing, your makeup, all of your personal care products, your jewelry, your kids' toys, look at your house, there are so many products. And so each of these products might not make a huge contribution to your exposure individually, but because we interact with so many across our lives, those exposures really add up for us. But they're also really important to the environment. What a lot of people don't realize is that the toxic chemicals that are used in consumer products can be released into the environment during their production, manufacture, use, and disposal. And consumer products are actually one of the biggest sources of toxic chemicals to our environment.
Really?
So this is actually a really great opportunity, even though it sounds a little bit disappointing, because if we can make consumer products with safer chemicals, we can lower our exposures, but we can also prevent their releases into the environment, and then we have to spend less money cleaning them up later.
I like the way you think of it. This is an opportunity. That's good. So let's talk specifically about cosmetics. How many kinds of hazardous chemicals do you see in cosmetics?
Cosmetics are complicated. There are plenty of cosmetics that don't contain any toxic chemicals, and that is really great news. Unfortunately, there are some cosmetics that do have toxic chemicals in them. And what we've found is that some cosmetics with toxic chemicals can be disproportionately marketed towards people of color.
How is that working? Explain that to us.
Yeah, so sometimes the ingredients that are used to do things like straighten hair or lighten skin can be toxic. And those types of products are disproportionately marketed towards people of color.
Interesting. So tell us about your study and what you're researching.
This has been a big issue in Washington State, and so our state legislature gave us proviso funding, which is funding that has a specific purpose, and it was to work with communities of color to identify and test cosmetic products for toxic chemicals. So we worked with some local health departments and social justice organizations, and it's a lot to share your personal care product use with someone you don't know, and we really appreciate their insights. So we had a lot of conversations, we had two-way dialogues, and we learned a lot about products that they were using, what they purchase, why they choose those products, where they buy them from, and then we went and purchased products. Our first phase of our study focused on lead, cadmium, arsenic, and formaldehyde.
Okay, when you hear those things, you think, oh my gosh, these are serious chemicals.
They are not chemicals that you want to find in your personal care and beauty
they
products,
are not.
That is for sure.
And tell us about the results. Did you find those chemicals in these products?
I'll start with the good news, and there's a lot of good news here actually. We didn't find cadmium in any of the products that we tested, so that's great news.
Yep.
We found arsenic in only 1 out of 30 of the products that we tested.
What product was that?
I think it was a powder.
Okay.
And we found lead in 3 out of 20 products, which is pretty good. That means that most products didn't have detectable concentrations of lead. Our formaldehyde results are a little bit more complicated, so I have to first back up and explain why would formaldehyde be in your personal care and beauty products. And it can be added directly in things like eyelash glue, for example, but most of the time, formaldehyde is detected in cosmetics because a different chemical is added, and that chemical acts as a preservative and over time releases formaldehyde into the product.
Oh,
so when we purchased 30 products to test for formaldehyde, we only purchased products that had a formaldehyde releasing ingredient on the label. And we did find formaldehyde in 26 out of 30 of those products. But that doesn't mean that most products have formaldehyde.
Yeah,
it means
sounds
that,
like that
when a formaldehyde releaser is used, we frequently detected formaldehyde in the product.
Can you tell us what that formaldehyde releaser is? Would people want to watch for that?
We had a couple, and I'll just give one example because they're kind of a mouthful of alphabet soup. But one that's pretty commonly used is DMDM hydantoin, and you can see it on the ingredient label.
So how surprising were these results? Did you expect to find these kinds of things?
Formaldehyde and lead have been detected in cosmetics before, so we were definitely expecting to get some hits, because lead is a contaminant, right? So how do you reduce contamination? It's a little bit more complicated, and the lead results actually give us a lot of hope that it's actually possible to get lead out of all products. The formaldehyde results are a little more complicated. We do expect to see formaldehyde in products when a formaldehyde releasing ingredient is used.
Okay, so I know you partnered with communities of color even in the way you tested. Can you explain a little bit more about how you did that?
Yeah, we really partnered with them in picking the products.
Okay.
We had 1 year to get this whole thing done, so we had to pick chemicals that we had lab capacity and QA standards for so that our work could be really defensible. And that meant that we didn't have a wide selection of chemicals that we could test for in this time frame.
So how did people within those communities react to hearing the results of this?
That's a great question. And one of the things that we really emphasized is kind of this more of a dialogue. And so what we've been focusing on is answering their questions around what can they do to avoid these chemicals in their products. And so we've spent a lot of time working on cosmetic toolkits for helping people make choices about what chemicals they want in their products, because honestly, like, I'm a toxicologist, right? So I go to the cosmetics aisle and I pick up my shampoo and I read all the ingredients, right? And then I think about how I can do that, but what about someone who's an English language learner in size 8 font at the grocery store? And so we're really trying to help empower communities with more information so that they can make choices about the products they want to buy.
It's hard to know. There's so many ingredients,
Exactly.
so many letters on them, and it's hard to know how to read everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've been helping with identifying certain chemicals, and then there are some certification and labeling programs that do third-party certifications that can be helpful. So kind of helping to provide more information to empower communities.
And now you guys are getting involved with regulatory programs and that side of it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So after we published the phase 1 of our study, our state legislature picked up our work and passed the Toxics Free Cosmetic Act. And that passed in 2023. So it's about 1 year old.
Pretty new still.
It is still very new, and it has restrictions for a number of chemicals in cosmetics. And then it also has a subsidy and pilot program to help promote the use of safer alternatives. So we're not only restricting what we don't want in cosmetics, we're also helping small manufacturers and small businesses, hair salons, make the change to safer chemistries.
I love that. I think that step is important.
It's
too.
so important. We want to look before we leap. So it's
Yeah.
a great opportunity there.
So tell me, for people who may be listening and say, oh, what should I do next? What should I look for? What advice would you have for people?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot.
I'm sure you do.
And it's hard because, those labels are just so long. There are a handful of formaldehyde releasers that you can avoid. We talked about diamhydantoin. We've also talked about how some products like hair relaxers and hair straighteners may be more likely to have toxic chemicals. And so picking those products with care. When you have a formaldehyde releaser in your product and you heat it up, it releases formaldehyde just a little bit quicker. So you might want to think about what products you're heating up with, like your hair dryer or your curling iron.
Okay, and it made me wonder when you were talking about that, what does formaldehyde do to a human body?
Yeah, so formaldehyde is a known human carcinogen. And the other thing that it can do is be an allergen. And that's a little bit of another concern that we have, particularly when people are using products directly on their skin and body. And we only had one product come in with concentrations high enough to really be considered an allergen.
Okay.
But in general, we want to reduce our exposure to carcinogens whenever we can. So we don't do risk assessment in our consumer products regulation. Instead, we try to focus on, is there a safer way? Is there an opportunity to avoid this altogether? So I can't really speak to whether the formaldehyde concentrations in these products are contributing to cancer risk, but if we can avoid exposing ourselves to a carcinogen,
It's always better.
good thing to do.
Yes. So what are the next steps in terms of research from here?
Yeah, so our next steps are really, we've shifted to focusing on our safer alternatives research. So we're looking for chemicals or alternatives that provide the same function as the chemicals that have been banned under the Toxics Free Cosmetic Act. And we'll publish some hazard assessments and promote those so that manufacturers can make choices about what they want to use in their products. And then we're working on getting that subsidy program up and running.
I love that you're involved in promoting the use of safer alternatives too.
Yeah, a lot of that promotion is really about transparency. And some manufacturers have the resources to do a full hazard assessment and others don't. And so by having a state agency do the hazard assessment and make it publicly available for everyone, it helps people make more informed choices.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marissa. It's fascinating research and it affects so many people.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.